Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3, Episode 1, Hegemony Part 2, and Season 3, Episode 2, Wedding Bell Blues. So I am going to include my review for both episodes in this one video since they both came out at the same time. I just can't be bothered doing it in separate videos or whatever. So I'll start with a spoiler warning for both episodes. However, I will have this in separate sections. I will talk about Season 3, Episode 1 first. And if you hadn't seen Episode 2, it's fine. I'm not going to give away any spoilers for Episode 2 in my review of Season 3, Episode 1. But then I will cover Season 3, Episode 2. There should be timestamps below if you want to skip ahead. So, getting into the first episode, Season 3, Episode 1. So I think it's very important for me to say that I really liked this episode. I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. It was a good episode. And the reason why I think it's important for me to say that is because it's going to sound like I'm complaining the whole time. Because I have a lot of thoughts that are mostly complaints about this episode. But I enjoyed it. Like, I did enjoy it. It was a good, suspenseful episode. It kept me engaged. But yeah, most of the things I have to say about it are negative. So, first of all, this is, I believe, if I'm not too mistaken, the first two-parter cliffhanger where part 1 ends the season and part 2 opens the season. I think this is the very first one we get in modern Trek. The proper two-parter. Well, it's mostly because shows like Discovery and Picard were serialized, so it's different. Where Strange New Worlds is not necessarily serialized; it's more episodic. It does have character stories that flow throughout the whole show, but it's not as flat out serialized as Discovery and Picard were. But both of those shows pretty much they would end the season have a hard stop on the season, where it would be the end of the season would be the end of the story, and then the next season they'd start a new story. You had Lower Decks did have some cliffhangers, Captain Freeman getting arrested or Tendi going off with the Ryans, but they weren't straight out two-parters, or Boimler going to the Titan or whatever. But yeah, they were not flat out part 1 was the finale and part 2. Other than a cliffhanger through storyline, which sometimes wasn't even resolved in the first episode, the Boimler thing or the Tendi thing. It took a couple episodes for that to resolve. So they weren't flat out finales part 1, premieres part 2, and so I think this is the first time that modern Trek has done that. This is of course something that Legacy Trek used to do all of the time, particularly Next Gen started the trend. Deep Space Nine apparently purposely avoided it. Some of the writers wanted to do it, but the producing team ultimately said, no, let's just have Odo say something shocking at the end of the season, and then we'll lead into the next season, but it won't be a two-parter. Although I heard someone once say that Deep Space Nine didn't have any cliffhanger endings at this season, and that's not true. I would argue that Call to Arms was definitely a cliffhanger ending, but it wasn't just Odo saying something shocking. But that wasn't a two-parter. That was an 8-parter. So it doesn't fit the bill. But Voyager would do that all the time. It started in season 2, and so did TNG. And Enterprise. Did it a couple times, Shockwave and whatnot. So it's a Star Trek tradition, but this is the first time that Modern Trek has done that. And it's funny because I remember some people would talk about Best of Both Worlds and stuff like that, and they were like, oh, we had to wait 3 months to find out what happened to the Borg. You kids nowadays have it easy. You can just Netflix and stream it, and you don't have to wait. We had to wait 2 years. 2 years for this cliffhanger to be resolved. Now, granted, it wasn't as, like, I'm not going to rate this as one of the most suspenseful or best cliffhangers. It wasn't as big of a deal as something like Best of Both Worlds, to be fair. But the problem is, and I hope they don't do this again, because having to wait 2 years, you really forget, and that's kind of a pain to make us wait 2 years. There's other shows out there like House of Dragon, Last of Us, which are doing this, which I fucking pissed me off because, you know, I wish it was only 3 months I had to wait, not 2 freaking years. But anyway, I didn't have time to rewatch Strange New Worlds seasons 1 and 2 before the season started. Unfortunately, I just did not have the time to do it. But I watched a couple of recaps just to remind me, and I did rewatch Hegemony Part 1 just last night, actually. So it was fresh in my mind. And I gotta say, I do think this, you know, because I talk about how this continues the tradition of doing the 2-parter over season break thing. It also continues the tradition of, from TNG and Voyager in particular, of Part 2 not being as good as Part 1. Part 1 had the through line of them being trapped in this colony world and having to rescue these colonists, and it had a certain trapped feeling of suspense to it, even like, you know, Chapel being trapped on the saucer section that was flying in space. It had a sort of trapped, like intense, like gotta go, like suspenseful feel to it that I feel like this episode didn't have. Now, this episode was still very suspenseful, don't get me wrong. There was a lot that was hanging in the balance. In fact, they were trying to resolve the whole, because at the start of season 2 they started setting up the storyline where the Gorn were gonna a huge threat, and they were going to threatening war against the Federation. And so this episode did further that story even more so. And you did feel the imminent threat of, well, the Gorn are going to invade the Federation. In fact, I did really like how they saw the invasion fleet like leave to go off and attack the Federation, and so that did raise the stakes, because at first the stakes was Pike trying to rescue his people, and then like they kind of had the balance, like, should I rescue my people or should I, stop the whole invasion of the Federation? And it's obvious Pike chose the Federation, but he didn't want to give up on his people either. So it was like a balance, which I did appreciate that a lot. And I think they did set up the whole thing with April, talking to Pike about it, about how they just they didn't want to risk all the Federation worlds, but Pike just pointing out, like, if we don't do anything now, then things are going to get worse. They're going to take that as an invitation to come and invade us. So the stakes were high, for sure. And I did feel that suspense, which is why I really did like this episode. So, what didn't I like? I gotta say, it did feel to me like they were just trying to wrap this whole thing up. Like they were just like, all right, let's wrap it all up. Like as I mentioned in season 2, they set up this storyline of the Gorn are going to invade, and it seemed like they're like, let's just wrap it all up in one episode. So it feels like they were like setting up for this huge thing, and it was just fixed like that. All Spike had to do was turn the Enterprise into this, draw this stellar matter and turn it into a star-like thing to trick the Gorn into going into hibernation, and that's it. No more Gorn. So I do get the impression that that's it for the Gorn. We won't see them again in Strange New Worlds. And, I am of mixed feelings about that. Because on the one hand, good. Because I didn't really like the way that Strange New Worlds handled the Gorn. In season 1, they were just like an excuse to rip off the movie Aliens. Like, even Hegemony Part 1 was kind of like also a rip-off of Aliens a bit. Not as bad as the season 1 episode was. And they're different. Like, they changed them so that they're like these monsters, and that's not how they came off in the original series before. They've been retconned. And again, retconning things is not necessarily a bad thing. There could be good retcons or retcons that still work. But I don't know. The fact that it just seems kind of cheap. And also the thing that really irritates me is that Akiva Goldsman, or whatever his name is, has said in interviews that, the Gorn, there's not a misunderstanding or there's not a diplomatic solution. The Gorn are just flat out evil monsters and there's nothing more to them. And that's not Star Trek. And first of all, and secondly, I mean, that is not how the Gorn were portrayed in Star Trek. The whole point of the episode Arena is that it was a misunderstanding between Kirk and the Gorn captain, and once Kirk understood that they were just, in their eyes, protecting themselves, that they could hammer out a diplomatic solution. But now they're just like, xenomorphs from aliens that are going around and capture humans so they could feed off of them and feed their engines, and they're just evil monsters that feed off of. That's not what the Gorn were. So, and even if I take my nerdy hat off and saying I don't care about retcons, it's still not that interesting. It's still not Star Trek. Star Trek is not about evil monsters that go around eating people. It's about diplomacy. It's about working things out. That's what actually made Discovery Season 4 so good, is that the big bad turned out to just be a miscommunication with a different kind of alien that they had to communicate with. So on that side of things, I'm kind of glad to have this storyline done, so we can move on to other things that aren't as not good. But on the other hand, it does feel like a disappointing resolution, because they were, as I said, season 2 took all this time setting up. Oh my God, the Gorn are going to invade us, this huge invasion force, and oh God, and all Pike has to do is trick them into hibernating, and seems kind of anticlimactic, is what I'm saying. It seemed like it was a very quick and easy way to solve the situation. Now, and that goes for the episode, because I thought the episode started strong with that battle. That battle in the first scene was really good, and how they had to collide the ship in order to get out of there and put a tracker on the other ship, and I feel like the whole thing with Pike freezing was just so they could have a cliffhanger, but then once the second episode started, he's snapped out of it immediately. It's okay, suggestions, and back to his normal self. So it seemed kind of It was just there for the cliffhanger. But anyway, I did like that opening scene, as I said. And then, Scotty having to come up with his, like, cloak. That's not really a cloak, but whatever. That would let them hide like zombies, I suppose. So I thought that even in this episode they were setting up like this intense, impossible situation, and they just like, all we got to do is this. Let's solve it. Now, granted, it wasn't that easy because they said there was a 1 in 1,000 chance that it would actually work or something like that, but they always say shit like that. It's going to work because they're not going to destroy the main crew in the very first episode of the season. So, it was just that's easy. It was all too easy. But anyway, I mean, again, not that it was easy because they had to run all the solar flare, but it's something that you knew was going to work. But, so then there's the people on the ship. I kind of had an issue with this because they were in these pods that were like consuming them, like slowly, one by one. Some people, they showed like the skeleton of some people had already been completely eaten, and Ortega's is like had her fucking hand like was already being digested. She was missing fingers, and that was horrifying. But they only freed the main characters, the 4 main characters. Weren't there more Starfleet officers? No, I don't think. Well, yeah, there were more Starfleet officers from, can't remember the name of the ship, but Captain Patel's ship. There was some more Starfleet officers. They didn't free them. They just freed the main characters of the show. And they're like, it's going to take too long to free everyone one by one. We have to find a way to free them all at once. And so they go off on this adventure. They fight some Gorn. They try to come up with the Technobabble BS to save everyone at once. And then they get on the shuttle. They fly the shuttle. And they get to just so happens the Enterprise was close to them. Very lucky for them. And then the Enterprise beams all the colonists on board. Here's my question about that. That took a long time to do. And you're telling me that cutting everyone down one by one would have taken longer than that? Bullshit, it would. It definitely would not. So here's my thing, just to rain on someone's parade. How many people were being eaten alive and consumed in the time that it took them to do all this shit? It did seem to be quite some time. So, my guess, maybe 10, 20 maybe people being eaten alive while they were wasting their time doing this when they could have just cut them down in the first one. I'm just saying, maybe it was even more than 20 people. I don't know. They didn't specify how long it took them to be eaten alive, but still, it's like, anyway. We don't have time to cut them down. Actually, we don't want to share screen time with the random extras. We want to just focus on our main characters. That's anyway. I did find the whole, and also it seemed like, again, a bit too easy. It's like kind of a Star Trek trope. It's just too easy for them they're on an enemy ship, that they would just be able to get their weapons and break out and steal a ship so easily. It's like heavy hand of the plot. That's all I'm saying. Although, as I said, it's kind of common in Star Trek, but still. It's always easy to break out of captivity. And it's like a James Bond villain thing, too, to just leave them there unsupervised. Just to be, we're going to kill you without... I don't know. But, as for the Battelle thing, Like, here's the whole thing I was thinking about this, is that Spock's like, I'm not a doctor, but I want to do everything I can to help save her life. And he goes down and works with Christine. I think they did it a way so that he could have a whole thing working with Christine, and then they could have their emotional moments or whatever. Another question for you. Why is a science officer and a nurse the only people treating this very, dire medical situation? Why is there not a doctor there? And you can't tell me that the Enterprise doesn't have any other doctors other than Omega. And even if they don't, which I don't buy, they surely do, the Enterprise met up with a fleet of other starships. Why didn't a doctor come from one of those ships? In fact, when this happened, when they met up with the fleet, I'm like, oh, they're going to bring another doctor on board, and it's going to be McCoy, and we're going to get our McCoy appearance in this episode. I am kind of glad they didn't do that, but that's what I was expecting, because they always seem to love to introduce those original series characters. Like, we've got Scotty already in the previous episode. So I was totally expecting them to do that, but they didn't do that, which is, as I said, I don't have an issue. I'm fine. I'm actually glad they didn't do that, but they didn't send any doctor on board. They just had a nurse and a science officer. And of course, you know why? It's because those are the main characters. They didn't want someone who's not a main, but it doesn't make any sense. Why didn't they have an actual doctor there taking care? I don't know. But anyway, as I said, like, don't get the false impression I didn't like this episode. I have my issues, but it was ultimately a good suspenseful episode. And yeah, Ortega's getting like sliced by the Gorn, like, that was super fucking intense, and how she was barely alive and had to beam her out. All that was super intense. And yeah, the Spock thing with Chapel trying to save Patel, that was kind of a just a lot of medical technobabble jargon. And eventually they did keep her alive. Oh, they kept her alive with Una's blood. I did like that. And how when Patel woke up, she's like, "No, you shouldn't have done that." And Pike's like, "I don't give a shit. I'm doing whatever I can to save your life." Like, those were powerful moments. I did like that. So yeah, my rating for Hegemony Part 2 out of 10 is going to be an 8. Extremely good. Yeah. I'd given the Hegemony Part 1 a 9, and I said it's going to be dependent on Part 2. I think I'll keep Part 1 at a 9, actually, because I think Part 1 was better, particularly with, it had that more trapped in the planet, like, intense feel, where here you felt the heavy hand of the plot a lot more. But it was still very suspenseful, and it was still very strong character moments, but it didn't work as well as Part 1, I believe. So, and I think I'm actually being a little generous by giving it an 8. But I'll give it an 8 because I enjoyed myself. It was very suspenseful, intense episode. Did kind of end rather easy, like, oh, let's just force them into hibernation. But anyway, that is Hegemony Part 2. So, now let's move on to Season 3, Episode 2, Wedding Bell Blues. And, like, off the bat, as soon as they said, oh, it's been 3 months, I'm like, I was pissed off. Because they kind of left it like Ortega's, oh my god, is she going to die? She's near death. And they're like, oh no, it's 3 months later, she's fine. In fact, they took like a while until after the credits came on before they actually showed Ortega's, and she's just boxing, she's fine. And I'm like, and they, even like in the previous one, they showed her getting stabbed. And I'm like, well, aren't you going to resolve that? And the other thing that kind of pisses me off is, and maybe someone in the comments can explain this to me, what happened to Captain Patel? Because they never mentioned that they actually extracted the Gorn. Or did I miss that? Or is the Gorn still inside her? And they're just found a way for them to cohabitate or some bullshit. And then they show her, recovering and, picking out her new ship. And Pike's like, oh, what new ship would you want? And blah, blah, blah. So they're acting like she's fine now. And they mentioned that she has, Una's blood in her, and how she doesn't like that, blah, blah, and they showed Una, donating more blood. But they didn't mention what the fuck happened to the Gorn baby, unless I missed it. Did they ever take it out? Maybe I missed it. I don't know. I think it would be really dumb if she's just walking around with the Gorn baby for the rest of her life. What? That wouldn't make any sense. So I don't know. Maybe I missed it. I don't know. I watched a couple other videos hoping someone else would explain this to me, but I couldn't find it anywhere yet. But probably after I release this video, I'll probably find something. But anyway, so those things pissed me off right off the bat. And the other thing is, as soon as the episode started, you heard the happy, joyful comedy music, and I'm like, oh shit, it's gonna be a lighthearted episode. And here's the not that I hate lighthearted episodes, but here's my worry. There's only 10 episodes this season, and judging by the trailer, there's at least 2 other lighthearted episodes coming up, at least. So here's my concern is that every episode this season is going to be a lighthearted comedy episode, which I would not like. And I do believe, I don't mind lighthearted comedy episodes, 2 max, especially if you only have 10 episodes a season, maybe 2 at the max. But as I said, it looks like there's going to be at least 3. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the one I'm thinking of is not going to be a lighthearted comedy episode. It's going to be something more along the lines of the fantasy episode with Mbega from season 1, which I actually really loved, contrary to most people. So, I don't know. It depends, but I'm worried about this season. Because I will say, jumping back into Strange New Worlds after 2 years, I do remember, how much I love this show. Even, the theme song and just the way that the special effects and how this feels like classic Trek. And so I really love the show and I really want to see more. But I do think that season 2 was a little bit of a step down from season 1. Maybe more than a little bit. Because it had, that Goofy Spock episode was terrible. The singing episode was terrible. And they just try to, and I actually didn't even like the time travel episode either. So it's they try to do weird and different things, but I wish they wouldn't. I wish they would just stick with the formula that works. Honestly, for the most part, I mean, I don't mind, I do like creativity in original things, but not if let's do a musical. That's not really being creative or original. That's just being goofy and dumb. So, or let's have all our main characters turn into Vulcans and make fun of Spock. I am so dreading that episode. So I'm hoping that this season's not going to be all silly. I hope we actually get some more good, serious episodes, is what I'm saying. I am a bit worried at the moment we're going to get... It's all going to be silly nonsense, which is not the show... what the show should be. If you want to do silly nonsense once in a while, fine. But not not the whole season. I sure as hell hope it isn't. But maybe I'm worrying about nothing. That being said, this episode was fine. It was actually good as a fun... lighthearted sort of romp. I did enjoy it. Wasn't the best thing ever. I'm not gonna beat around the bush here. I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. It's Trelane, and this is something that people had guessed from the information we got of the season and the trailers. Trying to think of the comedian's name, Rhys Darby or something, I believe. He's a New Zealander, so I should know better. I remember him from the What We Do in the Shadows movie. Great movie. We're werewolves, not swearwolves. Anyway, I think that was him. But anyway, yeah, and I've seen him in a few other things. I never saw Our Flag Is Death. Apparently he was in that too. But anyway, so people guessed he was playing Trelane, and it's clear that he was. Now, they never state in the episode it's Trelane, but it's Trelane. Like, they stated it without stating it. Like, the way he's dressed, the way he acts, the whole thing with him being a child and the parent coming to get him and him having these powers. Like, it's very clear it's Trelane. I think they probably never mentioned his name to try to, keep it within canon so that when Kirk meets him for the first time, or Spock even later on, well, Spock should have recognized him even if he did never say his name, but still. It's a way to try to keep it in canon, I suppose. Although I don't know if Spock ever saw his actual appearance, because they were implying that everyone else was seeing someone different, like they would bring it up in mirror images of him being a Vulcan at first and then an Andorian later, so maybe they never actually saw him, but still, very similar that Spock should have put it together when he actually met Trelane later on. So, yeah, it's clearly Trelane. And the other elephant in the room I gotta address, not wait, is the ending when the parent shows up to pick him up. I recognize John Delancey's voice. That was John Delancey. And plus, the way that Trelane was snapping his fingers, it was always a fan theory and speculation that Trelane was a Q. And of course, obviously, when the episode of the original series was made, Q wasn't a thing. In fact, when Roddenberry made Q for TNG, a lot of people were like, oh, you're just redoing Trelane. There were just similar ideas because Roddenberry was obsessed with doing godlike creatures, and this was just the prankster, menacing and jokester type of godlike creature, and he just did that idea more than once. But it was speculated throughout the years with the fans speculated there was even a book out about Trelane being a Q. So this episode kind of confirms it. It kind of confirms it in canon for the first time that Trelane is a Q. You could still say it isn't. There's they just got John Delancey the voice. It doesn't mean it's a Q. No, I think you get John Delancey the voice of someone with Q powers, it's fucking Q. It just is. In fact, I would even go as far as to say, because we know that Q has a son that we saw in Voyager, and so this could be Q2, his son. In fact, it could be his son at a younger age, because the Q can go travel in any time periods that they want. So this could be actually take place before the Voyager episode Q2, because the Q exist outside of time and go any century they want to. So this could have been shortly after his birth, while he was even younger, and they just travel through time and go back to the 23rd century, which is so I think this is the Q2. This is the same Q we saw in Q2 at a younger age. And that would mean it would be the same thing with Squire of Gothos. I like that. I like that canon. I like that sort of wrapping it up and saying it's the Q. Um, as for the plot with Roger Corby, which is of course, the mad scientist who goes insane, who tries to replace everyone with androids, and he himself is replaced with an android. And we knew that that him and Chapel were engaged to be married at one stage. And so, yeah, we see him in Strange New Worlds for the first time. I like how they made him a bit arrogant. I think that kind of works. And this is an interesting kind of Mr. Destiny kind of storyline where Spock was like all sad about Christine coming back with a boyfriend because he was expecting them to be able to start from where they left off, even though Christine was trying to be pretty clear in the previous episode that she wasn't holding out for that. But it was obvious that Spock was, and it was a shock to the system. And I could relate to that sort of unrequited love sort of feeling, that storyline, and just how down in dumps he was. But then he meets Trelane as the bartender, and it's like I don't know if you remember that movie Mr. Destiny from the early 90s with Michael Caine, and I think he was a bartender, yeah, so that's probably why I'm thinking of it, where he got this, served him a drink, and it allowed the guy to live out his fantasies of what if he ever was this famous, athlete or whatever, and how his life would have turned out differently. And that's kind of what they do here with, what if he was actually going to marry Nurse Chapel and have this happy life, but then for Roger Corby immediately was outside the delusion, and knew that this is not how things were, and he was talking to Spock and made him angry and smack him, and we saw this from the trailers, Spock punching him, and that snapped him out of it too, and so the two of them actually kind of team up because they realize that this is not supposed to be happening and something's off, and they had whenever they try to tell anyone about it, they're like, oh, whatever, blah blah blah, and they don't pay them any attention, and it's because Trelane is like manipulating them, and you see Trelane like uses powers every once in a while, and he gets pissed off when they try to break his fantasy. So that it was kind of fun. It was kind of a adventure type, lighthearted sort of thing. I do like how Spock had to team up with Roger Corby, and that he was instantly willing to put his differences with him aside because of the news that the bigger problem is that this wasn't, that they were being manipulated, that reality was being manipulated. And then I liked, what's his name, Reese Darby or whatever his name is. I liked him as Trelane. I think he did a really good job, and they stuck with the childlike, playing with people and being like irritated when someone tried to break his playtime sort of thing. So, and I thought he did a good job with that, and I thought it was fun and interesting having him try to manipulate things. And the whole thing with Spock like breaking Nurse Chapel out of it by reminding her of her love for Roger Corby, like that was a good character moment for Spock, but it was kind of silly, like, oh, love can break the spell, but whatever. I mean, it's a lighthearted episode, so you just go with it. And then like Q shows up. It's Q. He shows up. It's kind of the same ending as Squires Gothas, is that the parents, Turane's parents, have to show up in order to break him out of it, and save the day. So it's not anything like our main characters do to stop it. But still, it's like as soon as I heard John Delancey's it's a fucking cue. But anyway, and then they have the happy, they dance to Wham. I don't know. I'm just used to Star Trek having, like, they only listen to classical music. Like, they're not supposed to listen to anything from the 20th century. But that doesn't actually make any sense. There should be contemporary music. I'm just saying, but anyway. But yeah, they dance the Wham, and they have the happy ending. There was a whole thing with Ortega's, her brother, flirting with Uhura and blah blah blah, and I hope they're not, like, I don't think that they are, and I really hope they're not, like, hinting at a romance between La'an and Spock. I don't think they are. I think she was just being a good friend, and I hope they keep it that way. And I think they will, but yeah. But that was a nice little scene where she was like, "Oh, you learned to dance," and he was like, "Oh, I was told am I supposed to flow," or whatever. And so that was a fun moment, good character moment. I wish that, because they had Chapel, like, talking to Roger Corby after they broke the spell, and like, "Oh, I can't believe we went through that." I think they needed to have a moment with Spock and Chapel, where Spock, apologizes and saying that he accepts it, and I never meant for any of this to happen, that sort of thing. But because I think they kind of said the same thing by breaking her out of the spell. But I just think that it would have been better if there was a moment for the two of them after the spell was broken. But other than that, like, yeah, it was a fun little episode. We did get I believe, the first time that we ever seen, I don't know the name of this alien, but we've only seen this alien in animated form. First appeared in the animated series with the character Rex, these aliens that have 3 arms. And then we saw a couple on lower decks, but I'm pretty sure this is the first time we ever saw one in live action. And she was the bartender, and then, Pike and Uno came up to her and was like, "Oh, we're looking for someone. Would you like to come and work on the starship?" And they're like, "Yeah." So she's going to be a recurring character, apparently, a bartender on the Enterprise, which is fun. I do wonder how expensive it is to have that alien. I wonder if it's all CGI or if it is practical effects. I actually couldn't really tell, so I don't know. But that was, that was a fun character. And Scotty, I didn't mention him. He's still there, so he's apparently on the Enterprise now, which I guess he's going to be like an assistant engineer sort of thing. But yeah. so that was a fun little episode. So my rating for Wedding Bell Blues, out of 10, I'll give this a 7. I'm thinking of giving it an 8, but I was like, does it really deserve an 8? Probably not. I mean, I had fun with it. I love seeing Trelane. I just love that they confirmed he was a Q, and it was a fun little ride. I wasn't upset by it. Didn't think it was too cheesy or anything, but it was a little cheesy though, and it was kind of just a silly episode. So I don't think I could give it more than a 7, but 7, very good. So that is it for my reviews of Strange New Worlds Season 3, Episode 1 and 2. I will be back next week to cover Episode 3. And also, at the moment, I'm covering Deep Space Nine and Voyager, every episode, one episode at a time, which I will continue to do, so you can check out my channel for that and my continued coverage of Strange New Worlds. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.